Bill Gates, co-founder of Microsoft, is such a tech icon he doesn't need an introduction. You know the name, but did you know he's a successful investor too? Through his charity work with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Trust, we get special access to Bill Gates' portfolio. These are the companies he's invested in for the long haul. This stock portfolio's success or failure will determine the legacy of charitable giving for decades to come. And because he has so much money, it's available for the public to look at it. This is a deep look into Bill Gates' portfolio. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Trust holds 74 US stocks valued at almost $39 billion. Here we're looking at the top 50 with more than 90% of the portfolio in the top 8 stocks alone. These are the stocks Bill Gates owns in 2024 through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Trust. Microsoft is the biggest position with more than $15 billion invested into the company. As one of Microsoft's co-founders, it's not a surprise Bill Gates owns so much of the stock. Many of these Microsoft shares come from Bill Gates' personal donations toward his foundation. Microsoft's position sizing in the portfolio depends on the timing of some of these donations. Today it trades at $390 per share, right at its all-time highs, and Guru Focus gives it a value of around $354, with a fairly valued rating. The second biggest position, making up 18% of the portfolio, is Berkshire Hathaway. Warren Buffett and Bill Gates are longtime friends who were first introduced by Bill Gates' parents. They got to know each other over dinner, and when Bill Gates Sr. asked his dinner guests to write down the one word responsible for their success, Warren and Bill both wrote focus. Bill Gates' portfolio, like his career, is extremely focused. Berkshire Hathaway is an $8.1 billion position that makes up 18% of it. Berkshire is a diversified holding company where Warren Buffett has personally been picking the stocks for more than half a century. Berkshire today is Warren Buffett's masterpiece. It's a collection of a lot of wonderful businesses that have done extremely well over time and will likely continue to do well in the future. No wonder it's a core part of Bill Gates' portfolio. Berkshire also has a huge stock portfolio with more than half of it currently invested in Apple. So Bill Gates, through his ownership of Berkshire, is one of Apple's biggest shareholders as well. The Guru Focus value for Berkshire isn't going to make sense because of its big stock portfolio. Due to GAAP accounting rules, their net incomes change based on how their stocks swing up or down, so it's not very meaningful. Bill Gates and close friend Warren Buffett have both signed the Giving Pledge. They've each donated most of their wealth, consisting of Microsoft and Berkshire shares respectively. This is why the Foundation Trust has such big positions in both. The first stock bought in Bill Gates' portfolio that isn't from a donation is the Canadian National Railway. This position is valued at just under $7 billion and makes up around 15%. Canadian National is one of Canada's 2 Class 1 railroads. Right now, it trades near its all-time highs, just 9% off. Their railway network crosses Canada and goes all the way to the Gulf of Mexico through Chicago in the United States. Railways are assets that Warren Buffett has predicted will outperform even 100 years from now. They'll be important infrastructure to both Canada and the US respectively. Guru Focus gives Canadian National a fair value of around $134 per share, which is a handful of dollars above today's stock price. Next, we get another stock held by the defensive investor. This is Waste Management. With over a $6 billion position, it makes up 14% of the portfolio. Very similar to what we've looked at so far, Waste Management also trades at all-time highs. Waste Management is the largest garbage company in the United States. It's also one of the largest recyclers, having primarily grown through acquisitions over the years. They have a Guru Focus score that shows they may outperform in the future as such a huge infrastructure asset, but they have around a fairly valued stock price. A common theme so far is all of these stocks have been long-term compounders. At one point in their history, they've all been up more than 100 times, and they're very ingrained in society. That's the same story with their 5th largest position, Caterpillar. This comes in at $2 billion and is just less than 5% of the portfolio. Again, we really see the huge concentration of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Caterpillar is the world's largest manufacturer of heavy equipment. It also manufactures power solutions and locomotives, and has a huge dealer network that spans the globe. Similar to all the other companies we've looked at, Caterpillar trades close to its all-time highs. Their GF score shows they may outperform in the long term, and they've been a long-term compounder in their history. Plus, just the same, when we look at their GF value, Caterpillar is around fairly valued, and it's pretty close to today's stock price. The sixth biggest stock owned by Bill Gates is John Deere at $1.5 billion. This makes up less than 3.5% of the portfolio. John Deere is very similar to the last heavy equipment manufacturer we looked at, Caterpillar. Deere is the world's leading manufacturer of agricultural equipment, making some of the most iconic heavy industry machines. Like Caterpillar, it also has an extensive dealer network. Close to what we've seen in these other stocks, they have a GF score that says they may outperform in the long term. They trade 14% off of their all-time highs, and they've been a long-term compounder, being more than a 100-bagger in their history. Keep an eye on Deere as their stock price has really jumped since the 2020 market crash. They have a pretty big financing company, which can make their guru focus slightly off here. This comes in as modestly undervalued with a $518 fair value, which is $140 above John Deere's stock price. The seventh biggest stock is Ecolab, with holdings worth more than $1 billion. It makes up 2% of the portfolio. Ecolab fits the bill, looking very similar financially to a lot of these other stocks. They're the global market leader in cleaning and sanitation products for industrial manufacturing, hospitality, healthcare, and life sciences. They have a dominant position in the United States, and they're focused on international expansion. Their GF score says they may outperform in the long term. They trade 15% off of their all-time highs. When we look at the company historically, they're a long-term compounder and more than a 100-bagger from their low. Plus, right now, Guru Focus gives them a fair value that's almost exactly their current stock price. The eighth largest position is Coca-Cola Femsa. They're the main bottler for Mexico, Brazil, and much of the rest of Latin America. Coca-Cola Femsa makes up just over 1% of the portfolio with a $500 million position. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Trust is their biggest public shareholder. While Coca-Cola Femsa is still a market-leading, deeply entrenched business, their stock is different from what we've looked at so far. They trade 50% off of their all-time highs, which came after the global financial crisis. They've compounded a lot in their history, but not as much as their other companies. They paid out a lot of their profits to shareholders over time. Coca-Cola Femsa also has some of the same characteristics of what we've seen so far. Their Guru Focus score says they may outperform long term. This comes as their Guru Focus value shows that they're about fairly valued, just a few bucks, just a handful of dollars below today's stock price. These are the stocks Bill Gates owns the most of based on their average cost. These percentages look at the top 50 US listed holdings. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Trust owns more stocks, bonds, and ETFs internationally, but they're not shown here because they're not listed in the United States. In the trust, there's only a few more names, Walmart, FedEx, Waste Connection, and Schrodinger, before it really drops off into some very small positions. In the most recent quarter, they bought a ton of different stocks, but just in tiny amounts. Most of these mimic big names in the S&P 500 that they don't already own. The percentages here look different because this is based on market value. When we break these down by industry, most of the portfolio is in software. It's followed up by property casualty insurance, which is how Berkshire Hathaway is classified, then by railroads, environmental services, trucks, construction and farm equipment, chemicals, beverages, and specialty stores. By sector, Bill Gates' portfolio has big exposure to technology, finance, transportation, industrial, and manufacturing and industry. So what can we learn from Bill Gates' portfolio? He concentrates very heavy on market leaders. The big positions in the portfolio are nearly all solely invested into wide moat stocks. These are companies where it's very hard to overcome their competitive advantages, and they're durable over time. That's why we saw that they all have ratings that look like they may outperform even if they're fairly valued today, and they've had very long, very good track records of returns to shareholders. Speaking of returns, in the fourth quarter of 2023 alone, this portfolio brought in around $112 million in dividends alone. That comes even as their second biggest position, Berkshire Hathaway, doesn't pay out any dividends. With a foundation trust portfolio that guides the future of charitable giving, it makes sense that these companies are all stable, reliable winners over time. These are champions of American business across the globe. Yet again, they're only US holdings. They don't include what's listed overseas.